Good morning, everyone. This is a research made from many people from BRT. Actually, we have people from Católica de Chile, University of Sydney, also WRI Brazil, and University of Pretoria. Today, I'm going this next slide. I'm going to tell you about general information of COVID and our findings in COVID related to the reported travel activity, mainly in Latin America, in comparison with Australia, the modal use change, and work from home. Just to start, in the introduction, I just want to mention that the COVID-19 influences have been studied in other areas, such travel behavior, the risk perception about COVID, public transportation needs, and different influences in mobility, accessibility, and we also had investigation in working from home and work from home. Now I want to talk about the data we collected. We mainly collected information in 11 Latin American cities. We already have 2 waves in those cities, and we also have information in Australia and South Africa. This work was based on Beck and Hensher work, who in Australia started with the data collection, and for the Latin American scenario, we have already 2 different waves. The first one was in between September and November 2020, the first year of the pandemic, and second wave was last year between June and September. We are planning other waves in the future. And just to give you a very introduction to the questionnaire, we asked it about travel characteristics and modal choice. In the first wave, we just asked it about the main mode. In the second wave, we asked it about number of trips and purposes. We also asked it about information about the job and the availability of working from home, some of the COVID-19 potential influences, attitudes and perceptions of people related to COVID and related to the interaction with others. And we also have social demographic information. So as a general result related to the reported travel activity, we can find that in the Latin American context, we observed like an increase in working from home. In this case, working from home is represented by the white square. But in the second wave, we found that for Bogota, Buenos Aires, Santiago, Ricardo, can you do another one, please, in here? Bogota, Buenos Aires, Santiago, Belo Horizonte, Porto Alegre, Rio, and Sao Paulo, we found that for the second wave, there are a smaller proportion of people working from home, and this could be associated with returning to a normal activity. Another relevant thing here is that the blue one is related to public transport, and we found in all the cities where we measure this, a huge decrease related to public transportation. That is true for wave 1 and wave 2. However, in the Brazilian cities, we found like a recovery in the public transportation use, and that is different related to the other cities of Latin America. When we talk about the number of trips in each of the cities, next slide, please. We can see also here the public transportation, that is the blue one, has been reduced a lot. This is for all the purposes we have. And we also have the active modes, mainly the pedestrian active modes. Pedestrians is the green one, does not decrease in the different cities. So that could be a good result that we found. But in the case of public transportation, we found a huge decrease. Here we have a special city that is Monterrey, where the private vehicle use is higher. The proportion of private vehicle use is higher than in the other cities. So we are going to see that Monterrey have different results in comparison with the other Latin American cities. When we see these results in comparison to Australia, next slide, please. We found that, well, the bus use, mainly the public transport use in Australia was also reported as a huge decrease. And in the moment that the Hensher published this work, they also reported that the plan, that the people plan to develop to use the different public transport modes was not to increase the use of this kind of modes. And they also found a decrease in the private car use. When we talk about the purpose of the different trips, we found that for all the different purposes between the pre-COVID situation and the wave 2 situation, that all the purposes trips was reduced except for the food shopping. When people want to buy food, that is like the green one part of this, we did not find differences between the before and the wave 2. I am talking about here significant differences. And then when we compare with Australia again, there is an important difference here related to the food shopping, because in Australia they reported a decrease between the before COVID and the data collection. However, this is related to 2020 data collection in Australia, but there is an interesting finding in comparison with the results that we obtained from the Latin American context. Talking about the modal use change, first of all, we asked the people to tell us how they perceive that was the change in different use of different modes. In the case of public transport, we found that many of the people perceived that the public transportation decreased in comparison with the other options they have, except for Monterrey, that please, Ricardo, yeah, thank you. That we found for Monterrey that there are many people that don't use the public transportation, which is related to what I previously mentioned. In Monterrey, the use of private vehicles is higher in comparison with the other modes. When we talk about the private vehicle use, the next slide, thank you. We found like a similar response between the people that think that the use of private vehicles decrease and increase, except again for Monterrey, where they reported a huge decrease, related to the private vehicle use. And in the Brazilian cities, it is an interesting thing related that they reported that don't use or don't know the private vehicle for their trips. Then, when we talk about, oh, sorry, I have a mistake in the next slide. Can you, yeah, this is not private vehicle, this is walking. When they reported about walking, we found that many of the cities reported a decreased use. However, the cities of the Latin American context, mainly Bogotá, Buenos Aires, and Santiago, reported an increased use that is higher in the second wave in comparison with the first wave. And when we talk about bicycle use, we also find, next slide please, we also find for these same cities, I mean for Bogotá, Buenos Aires, Lima, and Quito, that they reported a higher proportion of people that think that there is an increased use in when we talk about the bicycles. However, there is a problem here, and it's that there is a lot of people that still don't know or don't use the bicycle between all the Latin American cities. Now I have the walking graphic here, and well, as I expected, almost everyone knows at least what is walking about. But in this case, in the same cities that I previously mentioned to you, we also found that there is not report that increased a perception increase related to the walking scenario for Bogotá, Buenos Aires, Lima, and Quito. And the other cities reported similar proportions between the different options. When we see the results for the Australian scenario, we found very similar results in comparison with Monterrey. For example, in the case of the private vehicle, that is in the upper left corner, we found that they reported mainly in Victoria a decrease in the use of private vehicles that is relevant for the context they have, and that they also reported a lot of people that don't know or don't use the different public transportation modes. In the case of the walking activity in Australia was reported about the same use of walking, and unfortunately cycling and running, many people reported that they don't know or they don't use that kind of modes. Then we have to, we wanted to check which one were the differences between the pre-COVID and the during COVID situation in terms of inertia, mainly to know what people usually use before COVID and in the moment we collected the data, which mode they use. And we found, as in many contexts worldwide, that many of the people is going from the different transportation modes to working from home. This is the different cities in Latin American context without Brazil, but for Brazil is almost the same. And we also found that people from public transportation, they also shifted to active and to private modes. So that was an interesting result that actually led us to propose a study that is related to understand how people take that decision of going to active or to private mode from the public transportation. In the case of Brazil, we found a similar result. I separated the presentation for Brazil here because in Brazil we measure 4 different cities, but mainly we find similar results in the Brazilian case. As we can see here, the work from home is a very relevant like type of activity now. So we also developed a paper related to work from home when we compare the different contexts. This is Latin American context, South Africa, and Australia, where we found, first of all, that the different government regulations in the cities where we measure this information affect someone that people know. So the regulations usually like touch everyone in the different countries. And we also found that as a result of the COVID-19 restriction, someone is working with a reduced pay during the pandemic, at least in the moment that we collected this data. This data was collected from the first wave. And when we talk about the number of days worked, if we talk, next slide please. When we talk about the number of days commuting before COVID-19, we found that all the countries mainly have like 5 days commuting before COVID. In Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, we found that they also have 6 days per week. And when we asked about the number of days working last week during COVID, we found like a similar proportion between the number of days they used to commute. So in number of days, there are no differences between the pre-COVID and the during COVID situation. However, the differences can be found in the working from home and the number of days commuting. When we talk about the number of days commuting, there are many people that during COVID-19 reported that they do not commute, the 0 days commuting. And it is also a high proportion of people reporting 5 days working from home per week. So working from home was seen as an option to replace the commute. That could be interesting to see in the future how working from home can be used, mainly to propose different policies related to sustainability here. And to finish my presentation, we also asked about the desired number of days people want to work from home in the future in a post-pandemic scenario. And for the Latin American context, and also for South Africa, we found that people still want to work from home, which is very different in comparison to the Australian context, where we found that almost nobody wants to work from home in a post-COVID scenario, at least in the moment that we collected this data. I want to thank the entire team. We have involved with many people in the South American, in the Latin American context, and in Australia and South Africa, and thank you. Please let me know if you have any questions.